Especially for motorized bikes, it is one thing to build an engine and put it on a bike, but it is a whole different rodeo for tuning one.
Brother, what's that?
One of the most asked questions that I have seen are how someone would go about tuning a carburetor, picking one out, and getting the engine to run in tip-top shape. Now, being familiar with your carburetor is a very important step in the process. A carburetor uses what are called jets, which are used to control the flow of the fuel in a specific fuel circuit. The most important aspect of tuning your carburetor is knowing exactly what you are doing. If you don't know what all the adjustments do, you could very likely destroy your engine, or your engine would run like trash. There are primarily three types of jets, those being the pilot jet, the needle jet, and the main jet. The pilot jet is what controls the fuel flow from idle to quarter throttle. The needle jet manages fuel flow between a quarter and 3/4 throttle. And in similar manner, the main jet controls 3/4 to full throttle. Keep in mind that all these adjustments slightly overlap one another, so there are no dead spots. However, the places where these adjustments overlap can cause confusion when tuning, such as bogging down in the low RPMs, which might sound and feel identical to a pilot jet issue, but it might actually require a needle clip adjustment. There are also usually two adjustment screws on the exterior of the carburetor. The first, which is usually easier to access and larger in size, is the idle control screw. This screw is responsible for cracking open the throttle just a tiny bit in order to set the idle to the appropriate RPM speed. Tightening clockwise will raise the idle speed, and loosening it will decrease the idle. The second adjustment screw, which is usually smaller and less accessible, is responsible for adding or restricting airflow to the pilot jet circuit. So, by tightening clockwise, you are restricting airflow a little bit and richening the pilot circuit. However, loosening counterclockwise will add more air, leaning out the pilot jet. Now that you know all the adjustment circuits and their functions, you need to learn how to determine a rich tune compared to a lean tune. There are many key distinctions between these two, but not a lot of people know. First, let's discuss bogging. Many people think that bogging is a result of too rich mixture, but a lean bog is a lot more common than what people think. You can usually tell a rich bog by these symptoms: hesitation and stuttering. When you twist the throttle, there's hesitation and sputtering in the engine's response. Reduced performance. The bike may feel sluggish and have reduced overall performance due to the rich fuel mixture. Stuttering at higher RPMs. When you are riding or dry revving and give it full throttle, it stutters and bogs, commonly called four-stroking. This also results in a lot of vibrations. Even though your engine doesn't necessarily bog down, your engine can still run terribly rich. One way to check this is to check your spark plug. If you're using the correct full synthetic oil, but your spark plug is still covered with a dark layer of carbon buildup, your carburetor is running rich. Now you can also check your exhaust. If you remove the exhaust system and there's a little bit of liquid and a lot of residue, there is a telltale sign of rich running conditions. Check your carburetor blowback. Now, this is not very bulletproof, but you can remove the air filter and dry rev your engine, which means revving your engine with the clutch pulled in. And if you can see fuel particles spraying out of the carburetor, this is a telltale sign of rich running conditions. Now, as I said, this is not a bulletproof point. There can be some exceptions, but backfiring. While it may sound cool, an engine that backfires is a telltale sign that it is running too rich. A backfire is literally caused by too much fuel in the engine, and the spark plug can't ignite it all, and it backs up into the exhaust and then burns. Not running at all. An engine that is running extremely rich won't even run at all. This can be confirmed if the spark plug tip is wet. This is due to so much fuel in the engine, it can't atomize and ignite. Lean conditions and bogging are as follows. Bogging that sounds like a gasp. One of the primary symptoms of a lean bog is hesitation or stumbling when you apply the throttle. The engine may struggle to respond immediately or smoothly, especially during rapid acceleration or under load. This can sound like a gasp of air and is basically what it is. Even if you don't have a specified bog, there are other telltale signs of the engine running too lean. Hanging idle, for instance. If your engine is running way too lean, or just a little bit too lean, you may have idle issues. When you dry rev your engine, and instead of returning the idle fairly quickly, a lean tune will cause the RPMs to very slowly drop, or not go to idle at all until you put load on the engine. Overheating. If your engine is overheating prematurely, you might want to check out the carburetor tune, because that can be a direct result of a lean tune. No torque. You might be able to dry rev your engine and it sounds dialed in, but if you go to ride and it seems to have a lack of torque, that is usually a strong indication of a lean tune. White or light colored spark plugs can also be a telltale sign of a lean condition. If you remove the spark plug and the tip is light colored and almost white, this is a strong indication of a lean fuel mixture. I highly recommend this fantastic video that I linked in the description below, and it really helps to determine rich and lean bogging, and the sound effects are priceless. Now, before you start tuning your engine, make sure you have the engine warmed up and it has been running for a few minutes. Don't worry about this if your carburetor is so out of tune your engine won't start, but keep in mind that the engine runs differently when warmed up compared to cold, which can throw off the tune completely. Now that you know the basics for finding the status of your carburetor, you can start tuning. Before you even start trying to tune your carburetor, however, make sure you have no air leaks, you are using the proper spark plug, and you are using the proper full synthetic premix oil, linked in the description. It is also important to make sure you are using fresh fuel and your engine is operating with the proper compression. This ensures there are no complications during the tuning process, and you don't have to backtrack if there are any issues. When tuning your carburetor, you need to start at the pilot jet. Make sure it idles well, and the throttle is snappy right off the idle, between idle and 1/4 throttle. And when you rev it, it goes back to idle perfectly fine. The idle speed also needs to be consistent, and there should be minimal bogging off the line. Remember that the fuel air screw is responsible for fine-tuning the pilot jet circuit. which makes it a lot easier to iron out bogging issues. After you have somewhat tuned your pilot jet and idle appropriately, move on to the needle jet, which runs directly off the pilot jet and is responsible for 1/4 to 3/4 throttle. This is a small needle and is part of the slide. This needle has a C-clip that usually has 5 positions. When you move the clip a position lower, it allows for more fuel to enter the engine, and a position higher restricts fuel flow. When there is a fresh transition between idle and 3/4 throttle, you know you got it tuned well. Make sure there is no bogging at mid-throttle and give it a few dry revs. If it doesn't bog down when you jam the throttle, and there's no bogging whatsoever when you launch off of it between idle and 3/4 throttle, you have it dialed in just right. Now that you have done the most work, there is probably the easiest part: tuning the main jet. Tuning the main jet is a piece of cake. If you can ride your bike, jam the throttle to full throttle, and if it doesn't bog after 3/4 throttle, your main jet is tuned perfectly. When you dry rev your engine to full throttle, there should be no bogging or hesitation, and no hiccups. But most importantly, when riding, the throttle should be responsive, and there should be no bogging and minimal dead spots. Now, one subject that is skipped over by a lot of these videos on the same subject is the importance of a slightly rich tune. It is important to tune your bike optimally for performance, but it is very important to have a tune that is slightly rich. It might sound odd, but when it comes to combustion, more fuel has a cooling effect, while less fuel is the main cause for overheating issues. Not only that, but rich mixture provides better lubrication and is more stable when it comes to combustion. A lean tune is not entirely detrimental on some engines, as long as you are using the correct full synthetic oil, but other engines such as the iron bore Minarellis require a slightly rich tune, or else it will seize up big time. So, while some promote the use of slightly lean tune, I argue that a tune that is just the tiniest bit on the rich side will promote the well-being of your engine, and some engines even require a rich tune. Carburetors and limitations. Now that we have discussed all of that, let's discuss what makes a good carburetor and some limitations of other carburetors. A good carburetor allows you to precisely and easily tune every aspect of the power curve. Especially on motorized bikes, the stock carburetors lack a lot of adjustments. Only having needle jet, main jet, and idle adjustments, these stock carburetors makes it easy to operate, but does not allow you to completely dial in your carburetor tune. A good carburetor will have an easily accessible pilot and main jet with an adjustable needle jet also. I doubt there is any carburetor that do not have an idle adjustment, but you want to also have a pilot air mixture screw. Not only should your carburetor have these adjustments, but it should be sized appropriately also. A carburetor with too large of a slide or inlet plate will almost drown the engine, run extremely rich, and will require tuning more frequently. A carburetor with too small of a slide or plate will perform sluggishly, have less peak power, and will have dead spots throughout the RPM range. A rule of thumb is that China dolls between 66 and 85 cc of the true displacement are limited to carburetors no smaller than about 17 millimeters and no larger than 21. However, if you start messing with hybrid engines and such, you could possibly use a larger carburetor. The Mikuni VM18 and NIBI PE17FL and PE19FL carburetors are fantastic because they are the perfect size, are super high quality, and they have all the adjustments. Now, we can't discuss carburetors without also mentioning the PWK 21mm carburetor, a carburetor that is very cheap and budget friendly, super easy to adjust, and it performs better than pretty much anything else out there. But there are a few limitations. Firstly, because of the size of this carburetor, it can be used to great success on larger 85cc China dolls, the Phantom 85 and Avenger 85, and this goes for hybrid engines also. But they perform trash on smaller China dolls, even with proper tuning and modifications. I hope this helps and serves as a good format for many, as it did me, and I hope this helps. If you have any questions, concerns, or you just want to chat, feel free to DM me, Noah Alger at facebook.com, noahalger at gmail.com, or you can message me on Reddit at sub to A.M.B Garage. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching.